we have some nerfs to the Retribution Paladin. No, to be expected. I'm not sure. Paladin was doing pretty good on beta, but
I think it's been overshadowed by Death Knights and Mages for a while. So
I didn't really see. I mean, sure, I can see some instances where but I feel they were kind of on the same line. I didn't feel. Apart from Frost Decay in two weeks ago or whatever, when it was like
and last week,
and yeah, last week as well.
And this week now because it's been buffed.
Yeah, sure, but I've seen Ret Paladins do great. I wasn't sure that Ret Paladins needed a nerf, but let's go through it and see what's up. So Herald of the Sun, Sun's avatar damage increased by 20%. Don't you think this is gonna save him? Because this is nothing. And Eternal Flame now is now 35% more effective on self was 25%. Now I'm gonna go through the Lightsmith for Holy and Protection. Let's go through the Templar really quick. So, Templar for Retribution, Wrathful Descent now deals 100% of the damage dealt to nearby enemies when Empyrean Hammer critically strikes. This was 80%. And Templar Sacrosanct Crusade healing can no longer crit. Okay, now this is nothing. No. Scrolling through Holy, and let's get down to the Retribution for my French lovers. All right, Nerubarar Palace set bonus. Wake of Ashes increases your damage done by 8% for 8 seconds. It was 10%, so they're starting off with the tier set bonus. Now, Blessed Champion now deals 25% reduced damage to secondary targets, was 50% reduced damage. Final Verdict damage reduced by 10%. Templar's Verdict damage reduced by 10%. Justicar Vengeance damage reduced by 10%.
That was needed.
Hammer of... we'll get to it. Hammer of Red damage reduced by 15%. Blade of Justice damage reduced by 20%, and this does not affect Blade of Vengeance. Blade of Vengeance damage increased by 25%. Expurgation damage reduced by 10%. Divine Storm damage increased by 25%. Templar Strike damage reduced by 10%. Templar Slash damage, this is the combos. Templar Slash damage reduced by 10%. Crusader Strikes damage reduced by 10%. Crusader Strike damage reduced by 10%. Word of Glory healing increased by 20%. An issue causing Radiant Glory to not function with fast back-to-back procs has been resolved. So it doesn't feel like it's gutted to the ground, but...
Feels like single target has been attacked.
Yeah, a lot of single target, which is interesting because I don't really feel Ret Paladins were that amazing in single target. I feel like AoE was still one of the strong points, at least from what I saw in dungeons, because the builds will not let you really be, good in single target and in AoE.
I think part of the reason why Ret's rework was so good was because you could just go a full AoE build and still have really good single target. And that has been shown by, a lot of Reds pushing very high keys, even if they were not in the highest level of keys, they were like just one below that. You would see a lot of Ret Paladins and you would see them do a lot of boss damage. And maybe that translated into the War Within, possibly in the raid testing. I would imagine these are not just done just like that. But
yeah, but in terms of like Mythic Plus, you have to remember, like when you saw a lot of Ret Paladins and a lot of keys, it was mainly because their survivability. So one thing that a lot of people that push high keys talk about is, specs that can be very self-reliant and very tanky. And Ret, make no mistake, was one of those after the rework. Now, damage profile aside, it could do great damage, but you never really saw it in the meta comps, not necessarily. I mean, even after the rework, you remember we had it was the same patch where an augmentation came in, right? Or somewhere close to that. And we still had the famous Fire Mage Shadow Priest augmentation and Bear and I don't know what healer was. Holy Paladin?
Holy Disc or Restore Shaman.
Something like that. So you didn't see Ret Paladin over there.
Yeah.
However, you've seen Ret Paladin in most of the high keys. It dealt good damage single. It didn't deal great. It was good. I mean, it was to the point where, okay, it's fine to bring it in. But the main factor for Ret Paladins being there was their tanking.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen them in the Race World first as well in the last couple of raids.
Yep.
I think they even ran 3 of them in Abyss most likely, and they were doing a lot of damage, but they were not like number 1 or anything. So, and it didn't really feel like this now either.
They really shined on AoE fights for sure. Like Echo of Neltharion was one of those where you had the mob phase where a lot of like uncapped AoE can take you places you've never been before. As as a Ret Paladin for the longest time. Don't get twisted. I love Ret Paladin. I'm not sure about these nerfs. Once again, they do feel like they are addressing a lot of the single target, because if you look at it, you have like the Divine Storm damage buff by 25%. Everything else kind of goes down and down and down and down and down. Testing it on the beta, it again didn't feel they were like in dungeons. At least I haven't seen like the whole raid testing to see how Ret Paladins, but I don't remember Ret Paladins really crushing it that hardly on the beta testing. I've seen warlocks crushing, I've seen mages or Arcane specifically. So who knows? Maybe this is
they might have some data. Maybe this is because we've talked about it before. Like, where is the standard of performance? Because we see specs do like double the damage of other specs. So okay, is it in between those two? Is it the one that's doing the double damage where everybody needs to be? So where are these nerfs and buffs in all of the specs? So it feels like this is one of the most conclusive tuning that we've seen for any spec that addresses very specific things consistently across the board, even things that they were buffed before. Because I remember wasn't Templar Strike and Templar combo thing buffed before, and also the dot from Expurgation was buffed like a couple of weeks ago, and now it's getting nerfed again.
Well, it's the whole damage. It's interesting because even Blizz Champion, you know, it's sort of like a buff because the reduced damage is 25% instead of 50%. The secondary attack. So that's, again, even you can call it an cleave / AoE buff as well, right? So it's interesting. Again, pretty weird to me because Rets really do great AoE damage. I don't really get this. Maybe they have some data for a different build that we don't have access to, and they say, oh my god, we have to tone down Red because it's getting there. Who knows? But I don't feel it's the end of the world yet for Reds. I know Reds like to doom a lot, but the nerfs don't look to be that bad, at least not for dungeons.
Not as much as for other specs.
We'll see.